Hello to our viewers. My name is Eugene Rhee. I'm a practicing urologist in San Diego. Just finished my 4-year term as the AUA Public Policy Chair, and I really wanted to thank you for really spending the time to listen and view a really interesting interview I'm having here with Dr. Hans Arora. Dr. Arora is a member of the public policy crew, if you will, a big part of the AMA and the AUA's representation at the AMA. He leads that delegation and has been doing it for how many years now?
Gosh, about going on 5 years now.
5 years.
Yeah.
So, as they say, the days are long, but the years are very short. So we have known each other for many years. We're good friends, and we're eager to share our stories, if you will, together and have a little conversation that maybe you can take part in, just listening and viewing what we have to say. The March 3rd through the 5th is the AUA Advocacy Summit. That is really the pinnacle of yearly of a meeting where we bring in urologists, patients, as well as our industry partners, as well into the government halls of government, to really advocate for urologists, the practices, the patients that we serve, and really get our voices heard. Bishop Desmond Tutu once said, really from his father, said, don't raise your voice, but really have a better argument. And so I think that is a crucial quote to start off with, and we'll kind of go from there. We were just talking before we started this whole thing about how we all started as kids. And so I'd like to kind of start there and go with just Hans, why don't you tell our viewers your story about how you started and how you thought who you are now is really a reflection of who you were as a little boy. Let's go there.
Yeah. So thank you for having me, Eugene. Thank you for inviting me to do this. I'm a pediatric urologist at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. It's really an incredible privilege to be here and to be able to speak to all of you about the things that continue to bring me back year after year. So thinking back to as a child, in Maryland, and full disclosure, these are stories from my mother more so than things that I remember. But we were talking a little bit about earlier about the first time I ever ran for something, perhaps the first interest I ever had in anything political, and it was for the what we call the mayor of my school class in second grade. It was called Beartown, Wingate Elementary in Bethesda, Maryland. Mrs. Sandier was our teacher, and the entire weekend. My dad helped me write a speech. First speech I ever wrote, with a lot of help. And I had it all on a notepad. And I got to school that day. My mother took me to school. And, I got to class, and we were putting our stuff down, and I threw up. So she took me home. So I never got to give that speech. And I never ran for the mayor of Beartown. Who knows what would have happened if I had won? Maybe I wouldn't be here today. Maybe I would have been totally would have just filled the bug, and I would never come back. But since then, I think the question is why run, right? And I think now, as I look back on that, it was kind of the first opportunity I saw to kind of serve a bigger purpose, to see that how can I help the people around me, how can I represent the people around me, and how can I get them excited about that opportunity too?
So, taking that story, do you believe in the experiences that you have working with urologists from different kinds of practices in advocacy work that we do? Do you think you're born with this ability to lead, or do you think you learn this ability to advocate? What do you think after working with so many people in this space?
Yeah, Eugene, you bring an interesting question. I think leadership skills can absolutely be learned.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not about. I don't think it's the skill set. I think most people agree you can learn the skills to be a thoughtful and effective leader. I think the question for most folks is, if and when they ever get inspired to lead, and what it is that does that.
Yeah.
I think in urology, it continues to be inspiring for me because one of the really nice benefits of being involved in this space is you get to meet so many people. So many people who either are excited about doing this kind of work, or they learn that it's something new for them that they never really imagined before. I mean, it's like the first time you open a book. The first time you open maybe Campbell's Urology, maybe a different book. I don't know. We'll leave that open. But the first time you open this book and you realize, it's like the first time you see what advocacy can be. Because there's this whole world of things that will affect the way that we practice and deliver care that nobody teaches you in medical school. Nobody goes out of their way to teach you in residency or fellowship or even in practice until it either affects you or somebody tries to bring you in, or you experience something that says, hold on a second, what are we doing and can we do it any differently? And that's an amazing experience.
Right. Yeah, I think what you're bringing up, and I think for us to really tell others in urology, is that we as doctors, right, with our patients, we are all leaders. Right? The community you serve, you are the one who has the experience and the trust of so many patients in the general public, right? And I think that it carries over. It's a natural progression. So I think that my observation too is of folks who really go beyond the reaches of their own practice to say, look, is there something more I can do? Yeah, sometimes it's an inherent process that maybe when you were a little boy like you, and you missed your opportunity, but now you've had plenty of opportunity with the speeches you've had. But that one speech that you couldn't do, I think that there are many opportunities that urologists have learned, right, over time in their own right. Some are very quiet in their way of approach. Others are very vocal, me included, in regards to how we describe our advocacy efforts. But moving forward, what's important about going to the summit, I think, is that it is very eye-opening to watch people for the first time when they come as urologists, right? And they go through that process. Why don't you take? Well, I won't spoil it. Why don't you take me through what you think when you first came to your first summit, and what you see now, people go to the summit, and when you leave and jump on that plane to go back home, what is it that? How can you describe that experience?
Thinking back to my first summit, and I've been very fortunate. I've been to a lot of summits. I do have a perspective that I've been to other advocacy days and other organizations. And I think one of the things that I find to be really unique about the AUA summit is that it's intentionally designed to be able to offer something to every aspect of urology.
Yep.
Right? It's not just while payment in Medicare payment reform is incredibly important and has such an important trickle-down effect on the rest of and every other on every other payment situation, Medicaid, commercial payment, but we do research advocacy, right? And so much so that that's a priority. One of our Hill priorities is always something research related, right? Which is very different from many other societies. Urology has many different subspecialties, and we try to ensure. I think the AUA Summit really tries to ensure that it's offering something that appeals to all those different groups, not just to try to find one thing that appeals to everybody, but try to reach people where they are. And so, it's very intentional. It's very intentional. And so when I go to a summit now, or when I bring people to the summit, especially people who've been in practice in a while, and they may have some preconceived notion about what it means to be involved in advocacy or politics, they leave and they say, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't realize how important that was. Or, okay, now, the best is they're like, okay, what can I do next? Mm-hmm. And I think that is really exciting, because then they've caught the bug.
Right. I think, my going to summits, what gets my eye is if I see somebody for the second time, right?
Yeah.
Because now you know they have the bug. Now they've been thinking about it for a year, and now something compelled them to book their flight, their hotel room, to take the time off away from the family, and come here for a few days, right, to D.C. to really advocate for urology and speak to the Congress and really get deep into it. And then I think to the point of catching the bug, you can see people develop, right? The younger urologist who starts to then get a little more active as far as getting, wanting to be more, more hungry, right? Or thirsty for really getting into a journey of urology and the advocacy with the AUA. Talk to us about, so how would you recommend if a young urologist comes in and says, I'm young and experienced? You could be 50 years old and want to be involved, or you could be, 30, coming out of fellowship. But what would you tell them in your experience, knowing how to get involved from the grassroots level of your own practice? You've been to a summit. You kind of you're developing this hunger. How would you get involved? What would you tell them?
Yeah, for somebody who's never been involved, but suddenly they're like, well, this might be interesting. I think the first thing I always tell people is the first step is show up. Whether it's to the summit, whether it's the in-district office for your legislator, for your federal legislator, or in your state, whether it's to your state medical society or your state urologic society, the first step, which is really the hardest, is showing up. Mm-hmm. Because that requires you to it's the first time you actually have to go do something, mm-hmm. right? Other than just read about it and talk about it or, post about it. You got to go somewhere and you got to do something. And you have to go, you show up and you meet people and you learn, and then you become empowered to actually make changes. Because suddenly you have resources that you didn't even know were possible. You have a new knowledge. And at the summit, we also help people learn how to talk to their legislator. So you come out with skills, and you come out with new friends and colleagues and hopefully mentors too. Mm-hmm. And so the first step is just showing up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I tell people a lot of times it's, you can also, if you don't have anything local in like your area, like maybe you're in a rural area, whatnot, maybe taking the time to be involved in the section, right? So your section has annual meetings, and those are really a fruitful basket of experience of folks who are in the policy world that can get you involved in the regional side, and yeah. I think that would be another opportunity of showing up and kind of doing those things while being on a regional basis, accessible and easy to get to as far as that's concerned. The other part is, as you get into this realm of work and the AUA Summit and advocacy, what is it that you see personally that you get out of the summit? You spend 3 days here. What is it what are kind of the feelings that you get after you finish this kind of work? And I mean, in terms of just showing up at the summit, doing all those visits, teaching and engaging with fellow urologists, politicians.
As I think about, from time to time I think about it's like, why am I investing this time? Mm-hmm. What am I getting out of this experience? And for me, a lot of it, as I look back, is like, well, why do I keep coming back? Why do I take a few days out of practice away from my family for this? This is an opportunity to give back. This is an opportunity to give back to my profession. It's an opportunity to give back to my colleagues. It's an opportunity to give back to my patients. We give every day to our patients. That's why we went into medicine. But there are things that will affect their care that are outside of the exam room. Mm-hmm. And there are policies being made without our input that are going to directly affect the way that they can receive care. And so if we are, living the full scope of our role as advocates, because we advocate for them in the exam room, we have to advocate for them outside of the exam room. And that's just an incredible way to give back, educating my colleagues, junior colleagues who've never done this kind of work before, and teaching them that yes, you can do this, demystifying what it means to do this work, because it's not complicated, right? You just have to show up and be interested and excited, and for those who haven't been, we'll teach you how to do it, and we will take you through it, and we will make it so that you feel comfortable doing it, and then hopefully you teach somebody else how to do it.
Yeah, I think the process, you bring up a good point. Many people have this imposter syndrome where they go, I'm just a practicing urologist. I don't know anything about policy. This sounds very complicated. We spend a lot of time in regards to bringing in people to really help talk, right? Let's say, for example, the workforce and the challenges of the workforce that every urologist knows, and the growing body of demand, right, of older patients as an example, and we bring in speakers, right, to talk about the demographics of the United States, the patients, and the demand. And then we talk about the supply of urologists. And then they bring in really interesting data for us, right, to really help you understand. And thus, when we go and do our Hill visits, I think that's so empowering now for those people. They're intimidated in the beginning because it's just out of the sandbox kind of experiences. But what my observation is that there's a clarity that comes into play when they come and visit and they talk about their practices. And right, so talk to me about how when you do a Hill visit, right? Take us to the anatomy of a Hill visit, just so as I'm interested to know your interpretation of that.
Yeah, I will say I do have the advantage of having sat on the other side of the table as a former AUA whole crew fellow. I did work in a congressional office for a little bit of time, actually on the receiving end of Hill visits. So when we do Hill visits, or sometimes they're called fly-ins, we go up to the Hill. Sometimes we have staff or at least somebody who's done this before. Everybody shuffles through the metal detectors and puts all their bags down. It's like you're going through the airport, except you don't take off your shoes, I guess. And you cram into this little office, and you get the opportunity. Sometimes you talk to the member of Congress or the senator, or you talk to one of their staff. It's one or the other. It kind of depends on your district and personal relationships and different things. But it's an opportunity for you to, we give you a few issues in the summit, and you talk about those issues, but your role there isn't just to share data. And I think that's where there's a bit of misconception. It's like it's a whole other language of things to learn. And I'm going to go back to what you said about the practicing urologist. The practicing urologist is the most important person to bring to that room, because they can bring their experience and the stories of their practice and their patients. They bring people's stories. And so I think, when people say, I have to talk about, all the details about payment reform and workforce and how that all the data and here's all the graphs and I heard all these things, that's not what I think. While people think that's what they have to do, that's not at all what you have to do. The people sitting on the other side of the table, the Congress people and their staff, they're not taking care of patients every day. They're doing this every day. They know the data. They want to know how this affects the people back home. How does it affect patients? How does it affect all the people who work in your practice? And so you just have to share that story. And that's, I think, ultimately what that experience is about. It's about sharing stories. And then, when you finish, it's important to be able to ensure that you keep lines of communication open. So after you talk, you may touch a little bit on the data, but then you talk about the stories you have, how a specific issue is affecting people back where you're from, and then following up with that with whomever you met, and following up, say do you have any questions? Is there anything else I can do? to help inform you about this issue? How can I continue to be a resource? And I think if you're really doing it optimally, depending on what you have the ability to do, is you continue that conversation when you go home. And I think that's the part that maybe we talk about a little less than or people think about a little less than when you're actually on the Hill, is how to take that conversation home. Mm-hmm. And you go back and you tell the other urologists with whom you work, hey, this is what I did. Mm-hmm. And it was not that scary. Right? And then they get excited and then they come. But then similarly, you continue the conversation you had with the office. You're the folks in Congress, they all have offices back in their districts. Continue the conversation there. Follow up with them. And that, I think, is optimally how we could do Hill visits, not really as one-offs, but as the beginning of a conversation.
Right. After you put on your hat of working on that side mm-hmm. of in member of Congress, and you're in the office, mm-hmm. you're taking notes.
Yes.
You listen to a group of farmers or a group of urologists. I mean, there's just different interest groups who come in, right?
Yes.
So how do you take that back? You debrief with the member of Congress? Yes. How does that work?
Yeah, so we'll take the issues that are being discussed. Usually it's optimal to come in with, say, if there's a specific bill or that's being considered in Congress, to be able to attach the conversation to that, because it has to be relevant to what's happening right now. If there's no specific bill, it's hard for the congressperson or senator to be able to say, like, okay, well, what am I going to do about this?
Right.
And so you take that conversation, and the notes, everybody comes with a sheet of paper, a leave behind, they call it, about their organization or interest group's perspective on an issue. But what we're really writing down is taking note of is, what is the story? And if you ever watch a staffer while they're listening to you, it's when you start telling a story that they start furiously scribbling notes, because that is the most important thing, I think, for them, is understanding how this is actually affecting the individual person. And so, if everybody comes in and says the same thing and hands the same sheet of paper, it's a tick mark, which is still important, right? But it's when you're relaying that to the member of Congress, they're like, okay, how many people came in? Who came in? Okay.
Right.
But when you can say, all right, listen to this story I heard, right? Then that congressperson takes that story, and if it resonates with them, if it rings true to them, then they can then reshare that story to bring other members of Congress to the fold, to be on the same side of the issue as you.
Right.
And so we, depending on the member, you might do that every day, you might do it every week. But then that's, depending on how taken they are by the issue, then it becomes something that they may decide they want to co-sponsor or champion themselves. And then they send their staff out to other offices to work, when you're not there.
Right.
And that's really powerful. If you can inspire one member of Congress, it's incredible, because then they're fighting for the issue too.
You make me want to go back and find that old How a Bill Becomes Law. What do they call that? the ABC
Schoolhouse Rock.
Schoolhouse Rock.
Yes,
yeah. Right. The people on the urology side, when we go in and visit, right? Like I work at Kaiser Permanente, one of the largest, if not the largest, healthcare organization in the country. But I'll be with somebody who's in private practice, who's with, maybe a group of 4 urologists, and then maybe somebody from the VA. Maybe there's a resident. Maybe there's somebody from UCLA with us. I mean, my point is that these are urologists from all walks of different practices that are able to share their story in very unique ways that are very common. The common ground is to talk to the legislative aide or the member of Congress, right, in regards to the stories to support a bill, right? So I think those are the most compelling things. I think in a nutshell, we've talked about, the experience and the summit and that sort of thing. What do you, in terms of the overall joy of urology, how does this align? You're a very positive person. I always enjoy seeing you, Hans, and you convey that, your presence. Talk to us about this work and why it gives you such joy.
So, as I said before, I'm a pediatric urologist.
You guys are all happy.
We love what we do because we talk to kids every day. And I'm not saying that it's like talking to kids, but one of the really exciting things about talking to kids, if I can draw an analogy, is that they're always excited about things and they will feed off your excitement. And I could walk into a room and I could be very stoic and not very interested, and children do not respond well. Mm-hmm. And as adults, it's not that we respond differently, we just hide it better. Mm-hmm. And so if we bring that enthusiasm for an issue, whether it's positive or not so positive, to a room, then we get other people excited. And it feels good to make other people feel the same way that you do about mm-hmm. something. And that's a part of this. And it makes urology more joyful mm-hmm. because then I'm getting other people excited about what we do mm-hmm. and what my colleagues do. In urology, for most people, we have to explain what we do. And the first thing that they often hear, neurology, brain, and I'm like, hold on. No. Let me reframe that. But when they do know, they're like, okay, I guess, yeah, I know somebody who had that. Yeah, I've had a kidney stone. Oh yeah, my dad saw somebody, and when they come to realize what we do and they understand how that affects the people around them, and how everybody knows somebody who's had to see a urologist, and you help them understand how it affects the people in their lives, then they start to realize, okay, all right, well, this is important for people I know. And then you help them understand how they can help other people who are like the people they know. And that's when you get them really excited and enthusiastic, and being able to help them come to that, to be able to educate and inspire is just, I feel like I get so much more out of the experience. As much as I've talked about how I like helping other people understand things, I get so much more out of that, I think, than I'm ever going to be able to give anybody.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think that when I have one patient at a time, we have a unique and noble profession that, from a trust point of view with the lay public, I think, we enjoy that relationship, right? One person at a time, one patient at a time. Doing this work adds another layer of really making a difference, going back to us as kids and who we were and why we have these campaign speeches, right? I think there's an inherent level of hunger for making a difference, right, in the practice that we have, and perhaps now you've gone into a bigger sense of making a difference for urologists across the country, hence healthcare in general. And I think that if not you, then who? And I think that that is an important comment to really get out there for people, because no one else knows the problems, the issues, as far as that's concerned, but us as urologists, right, to advocate for us. And so that's why it's so important. So I hope that we'll see more people March 3rd through the 5th. It's huge. Last year was probably the biggest we've had, and really proud of the accomplishments that you have been involved in, and really getting the village of urology and advocacy together. And to the viewers, I hope this gives you a slice of what March 3rd to the 5th could be, but more importantly, what it is that you can do outside of just one day at a time, one patient at a time, but really kind of making a difference for really healthcare in general. And we hope that might also be an antidote to continue with having a joyful practice. So thank you for listening and watching us, and we hope to see you in Washington, D.C. Look it up on the internet, March 3rd to 5th, AUA Advocacy Summit, and register, and I promise you won't be disappointed. Thank you. Thanks, Hans.
Thank you, Eugene, for having me.